How you doing? Spaceman here, and this is my opinion on why the transfer portal and NIL is ruining college football. Now, to start with the transfer portal, I believe they should reinstate the old rules of the transfer portal, whereas if you transfer, you have to sit a year. You can't play a year for the new school you transfer to, and here's why. Of all the as of 2025, transferring has always been a thing for 20 plus years. But of all the new star recruits, all the big recruits in the nation of 4 or 5 stars or high level 3 stars, you can even say, the amount of these players transferring and the chances of these players transferring is extraordinarily high and more than it has ever been before. And the reason because of that is playing time. Obviously, I know the argument is pretty valid if, hey, I'm going to transfer if I'm not playing, right? But if you're a 4 or 5 star, 3 star, and you go to a school which is a bigger school, like an SEC school, for example, Georgia, Alabama, schools like that, you have to accept the fact that there's a decent chance that you're not going to play. Because you got to think about all these positions and all these teams are packed with 4, 5 stars, 3 stars, and players who are redshirted. They could be in college for 5 years, and especially with the COVID and rules about the injuries, where it's like if you get a season-ending injury, you get a whole another year eligibility. You could be 27 now and play college football. I believe this year there's a 28-year-old quarterback, and he finally, quote unquote, retired, and he's done playing college football. Um, you get the fact is that you're an 18-year-old, and also, and like, even though you're one of the best athletes in the nation, best players in the nation at your position, or just the best out of everybody, and the number one recruit, the expectation to play right away is kind of unhinged. I would say it's too much of a norm nowadays, and it really ruins the opportunity of dominant teams being good every single year. What I mean by it is, like, for example, of the Nick Saban era out Alabama, 15 years of pure dominance, of multiple national championships under his belt, and constant top 10 ranked team for 15 years straight. Um, and basically, like, the idea if you beat Alabama, even if you're one of the top teams in the nation as well, it was basically an upset. And making a team that dominant anymore is going to be almost impossible because of the new transfer rules. Even like Alabama, Miami, or especially Florida State this year, I'll get into that about Florida State. If you have a bad season, or you got a big recruit who's not playing right away because you have a better player at the position, you transfer immediately, and that ruins everything. It really does. It ruins everything, and it makes it extremely difficult to have a team who could be back to back national championship winners. It's almost impossible. Um, the reason why I think for players, not even as teams, for players, and why the transporter is so bad nowadays is because it's such a norm that players even leave their teams, and even when they're starting, or they're already playing good at the team that they already went to. And now I can get the argument of transferring to a bigger school so you can get higher draft stock if you want to try to be a pro football player, obviously, of course. But you got to take into consideration where it's a huge risk and you're not going to ever play again, and your career is going to be done. Um, the biggest example of this year is, of course, DJ Ukulele, who transferred to Florida State this past year and did absolutely terrible. So he's been in college. This season was his 5th season. He went to Clemson. He redshirted, but he played in a couple games. He did pretty good. And then his redshirt sophomore year, redshirt freshman year, he didn't play very well. But again, you're a redshirt freshman. You're still 19, 20 years old. It's not that big of a deal, right? And then he transferred, and then his redshirt sophomore and junior year, he did pretty good. He was an elite quarterback, but I believe he was pretty good. I'd say at the time before he transferred to Florida State, he was a guaranteed draft pick of a mid to high draft pick. I believe the top 4 rounds of his projections at the time, which is a very huge accomplishment still. But then he transferred to Florida State, and obviously the rumors of him will be the next great quarterback at Florida State for a year, because they got their starting quarterback who was an absolute beast. Graduated the last season, and they went 11-1, and they didn't make it to the national championship, but they made it pretty close in the college playoff. And they thought they could do it again with DJ, and they had a lot of returning players coming back, and players coming up to play after a couple of years to sit on the bench, right? So, but it was a terrible decision for DJ, because I understand that you could have bad coordinators, bad coaches, so you transfer, right? But you transfer to 3 different schools, and you only got a year to fit into the system, figure it out, and that's just not enough time for most players. When he transferred to Florida State, he was given the instant starter job. Obviously, he was the #1 quarterback at transfer portal, as rightfully so, because he did good the 2 years prior. And he only played 5 games this year. He got benched. Florida State this year went 2-10, and the year before they went 11-1. Pretty big difference, and they did lose a lot of players. Yeah, but they got a lot of returning players coming back, and it was a very prestigious program still, and they still got a lot of kids coming in, a lot of good freshmen, a lot of guys coming up, and also DJ. So they still, on paper, had a really good team. And from 11-1 to 2-10 in one season is insane. That's with the big top schools in the nation. That's unheard of. That never happens anymore. So you got benched in week 6. You played 5 games. They went 1-4. You did terrible against SMU. You did terrible against Cal, and obviously really bad in Georgia Tech, which they got upsetted. And which Georgia Tech is an underrated team. They're very good. Haynes King is a beast, and I think he's gonna stay for his senior season. I have to check up on that, but when he is done at Georgia Tech, he's going to get drafted, and I think rather high. Yeah, so I think if DJ just stayed at his old school, he would have been much better off than what happened at Florida State, because he still declared for the draft this year, but I don't even think he's gonna. There's a chance he might go undrafted. I still think he's gonna get drafted as a later round guy, or there's a couple teams who are desperate for a quarterback or a backup quarterback now, so he might get drafted earlier. He still might get drafted in the same area, 4th, 5th round pick, but I don't believe so. Another example of a past transfer who's still very recent, who basically ruined his college football career, is Phil Jakovich. Like I said, I'm a big fan of Boston College, and he was the starting quarterback for us for 2 years. Not saying he was an elite quarterback, but he was an above average quarterback for us. He got us to a bowl year 2 years in a row. That was when AJ Dillon and Zay Flowers are on the team, also as well. But he was good. He was on the trajectory to be drafted as a quarterback in the NFL when his time was up, right? But his senior season, he transferred to Pitt, and he's from Pittsburgh, so he wanted to play for his hometown team, which I respect. But again, he just went into a bad situation. He didn't even start a quarterback. Then he made a position change to tight end, in which he played not that much though, and ruined his draft stock. There's a chance he also might not get drafted this year, because even if he does get drafted, what are they going to draft him as? An athlete? Tight end, quarterback? And if he stayed at Boston College, he would have played, of course, obviously this past season, and I think we would have been done a little bit better than we did this year. And the current quarterback, Thomas Castellanos, wouldn't even have transferred here, and also he's transferring again. So we're gonna have a different quarterback for the next upcoming season because he played. Well, Thomas Castellanos played okay. I don't think he played as bad as people think he did, but he did get benched in the Syracuse game because he wasn't playing good. And like 2 hours after the game, he entered the transfer portal. So, and I think his career is going to be done. Um, NIL. The reason why the NIL is such a huge issue now is the budgets. For example, like Miami has 40 mil of NIL money every year, or even more, and that's a huge advantage compared to other schools. Um, why that's such an issue is because like the fight with David Goliath of quote unquote weaker or unranked teams going against ranked teams on if on upsets and how those are the best games of the year is going to drop down or basically not even exist anymore. And why I say this because all these big name players out of high school are not going to commit to these small schools anymore. And I'm not saying that's like a huge norm, but it usually is a couple every year. And it's a couple of small schools who build up a program and compete with these big teams with big markets, big reputations. And this is not going to be a thing anymore because of this NIL money. For example, the number one quarterback going into college for this upcoming season is Bryce Underwood. And he committed to Ohio State, and then he flipped to Michigan. And you look in the research of why he flipped into Michigan is he offered him $7 million a year in NIL money, which amazing for the player. I think NIL is amazing for players and players going into college and transfers and all those sorts of things because those players do deserve an income. They do. Because if you win a national championship and you start a quarterback on this team, you're bringing a lot of views for your school. You're bringing a lot of money, bringing a lot of sponsorships for your school. You're making the money a lot of schools, so you should get a portion of that, right? But that's the whole reason why he flipped at Michigan. Let's be real. It's the whole reason why he flipped. And obviously, he should have. I would have taken the deal too if you got offered $7 million a year to attend the school to play college football. Because you never know, your career might not work out. You might get injured. You never know to take the money, right? That's an example. And all these other schools have no NIL budget or very little. You know, you got like 500 grand, and you're not gonna convince a 5-star player to come to your school if they got millions of dollars from other schools, right? Um, so it ruins the chance with that, and like the only chance I think a team who is not a regular who could become an elite team and compete for national championships or teams in popular areas like I know FAU isn't that good, Florida Atlantic, but again they're in a very popular area in the country. And same thing with UNC, North Carolina. Obviously, they got Bill Belichick in. They got a new revamped NIL budget. They got more money, and literally just the reputation of Bill Belichick's. He signed like 4 stars already, and he's only been there for a month or two. So that program's always been really good, though. It's been pretty good. But I think in a couple years' time, they could have an actual chance at a shot at the national championship if it works out over there. So basically, I think they should take the old transfer rules back. They should have an NIL maximum and NIL minimum for every team. If you're a higher level team, obviously you have more, and a different maximum, but it should be a plateau. And same thing if you're a lower level team, even if you go 0-11, you have a certain amount of minimum NIL budget so you can possibly rebuild your team, right, and attract people to attend your school. Yeah, that's just my opinion. Thanks for listening to me rant. Have a good one.